What's going on, guys? I'm here with my partner Dylan right now, and we're here to talk to you about basically everything that happened in 2019. Go through some of our homes that we're currently working on right now. Well, as much as we can. We want to tell you guys the bad stuff because the good stuff is always so easy to see. So we're gonna let you know what different pitfalls to look for and basically just answer some questions right now. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, so we get this question a lot. How did you guys accomplish what you did this year? And where were the goals? Where did you start out? And I think it really dials back to a day, a little over a year ago now. It was middle of December last year. And we sat down in a room in my office in Oakville, actually, and three of us went through and built out a plan. And at the time I said, hey, why don't we create a roadmap on what your goals are? What was your goal?
My goal last year was, it was an audacious one, but to have about 200 to 250 properties. Basically, I was sitting down there with Dylan and one of his mentors as well too, and he took my goal and was like, you know what, Rob, this is what I want my goal to be. So now your goal's got to go up a little bit. So he basically took what I wanted to do. And again, this is always very important, guys, because your goal setting, it doesn't always mean you're going to hit the goals that you wanted to get to. But again, if you don't set them big enough and you're only coming up to about 50% of a small task, it's not very motivating. But if you're going to 70% or 80% of a large goal that you had, it's going to be much easier to move forward, and you're going to feel much better about your accomplishments, and you're also going to be doing a lot better problem solving. So yeah, that's kind of what happened last year, and it led to a lot of what we're doing in 2019 and even more outrageous goals for 2020. So
as much as we do so much together, I mean, there's also that aspect that you do stuff on your own, I do stuff on my own, and I have a real estate investment coach, and I remember I sat down and spoke with him last year. He was really my 2019 coach, and I told him our goals of 100 million and what that looked like. And he said, well, my job as a coach is to actually push people outside the box and get them to the next level of production. He said, you're my first student that I've actually had to say, hey, let's make that a 2-year goal. So it was your audacious goal that ended up going and getting my real estate investment coach that was working with me directly on actually dialing it back and saying, hey, you know what? If you don't hit your 1-year goal in 1 year, if you hit it in 2, that's still pretty damn good. And we're on track. I think we're ready to ramp up and hit that goal in year 2 and even start kind of thinking a little larger for 2020.
It's true. And guys, honestly, with that, it's like, it really is about setting the goal first. Obviously, you got to be confident with yourself and you got to bulldoze through problems that happen, but like nothing is going to be easy. I mean, we're relatively young for what we're doing. So it's not like we're sitting here with millions and millions of dollars in the account and, you know, oh, we're just rich guys going in here and buying a lot of properties. No, we need to be extremely creative. We have to find the deals. We have to find the ones that we can increase in value. We have to make sure that, you know, we're working well with the lenders and that cash flow is coming in at a reasonable speed so that we're able to finish these projects and not delay on them too often. So this doesn't come without, a lot of sweat equity and a lot of problem solving like any company. And obviously the bigger goals you have, you tend to have more problems as well too. And that's something that, if you have the right focus in goals and right why, a lot of people ask, why are you doing this? And you have the right reasons in your head, then you're going to be able to go through those hurdles, and that's all they're going to be. Because, a business is nothing but problem solving, and we both, realize that. We both work very well together, but we're both also extremely independent and extremely driven, which is what helps it, really what helps it mesh. So we're on the same page with that. So
you just spoke about goals and touched on some different areas. So we get that question a lot too. What is your goals? And I think that it really dials back to what is McDonald's known for? They're known for a cheeseburger. Right, and you love this story because you heard
a good one.
Yeah, exactly. They're the Big Mac, right? And you heard me on stage in the middle of the year this year talk about a cheeseburger, and I think that was the big takeaway for the whole room, 350 people or so, is what is your cheeseburger? Find your cheeseburger. So why don't you share with the audience what our cheeseburger is? You told me about 3 criteria when we started this. Why don't we bust into that?
So guys, the criteria that we like to stick by, again, I almost say it's the poor man's way to wealth accumulation, right? So you're not coming in here with tons of money. When I first started, I know when Dylan first started on his own, he was doing smaller projects. My first project was, 127,000, and I think we found a way to put 5% down, and this is like 8 years ago now. And one of the big things with that is like you got to be resourceful, right? You're not just going to be given everything. And most people, if they're getting to a certain level, they did do it on their own. I mean, you have generational wealth that kind of gets there, and different, lottery winners and things like that. But that's not the common denominator when it comes to success.
It dies off in 2 generations, FYI.
Absolutely, typically. You have the management on the second one, and the third generation becomes the spender.
First generation makes it, second generation spends it, third generation goes bankrupt.
Yeah, so now to answer the question, because we went off track there, but the 3 criteria we look for, we're an income property, so we want to be cash flowing. One of the first things we looked out there is like, a lot of people buy properties because they just want to kind of have some equity, but then often they find after property taxes, insurance, and everything, they wind up losing money. So we wanted to purchase properties that were at a sustainable cap rate. So, right now it's gone down a little bit in the markets that have gone up, and the rental income hasn't gone up quite as much as the market. So we're in Niagara quite a bit. That's where a lot of our properties are, and that went up 13% last year. Okay, so with a higher end value on the appraisals, it's great for trying to recoup some of your capital out, but it's not going to be as good for cash flows. So what you want to do, guys, is you want to stick to, say, 5 or 6% cap rate plus, which is what we're trying to do. And then also make sure that you're purchasing homes where that if you're adding value to them, you're able to recoup as much capital out as you possibly can. Now, it's an imperfect science. You're not always going to get all your capital out. That would make things too easy. But if you buy a home and you're estimating that your renovation cost is going to come to about 75% at the after repair value or not, and you know that you're able to refinance at 75 to 80%, well, then you're going to be far in the direction that you want to be. So, I mean, example, if you're buying a home just as a down payment and it's $400,000 and you're putting 20% down, you can own that home and it's still going to get you a great return. But if you can find one that's $250,000 and then you're going to put $60,000, $70,000 into renovations and now it's worth $400,000, well, then when you refinance, you're going to get a lot more capital back and you're going to be able to use that faster than just simply holding on to it. So adding value is a big thing. Making the units great where you are, because really you're there to do a service. You want to bring up the city, you want to bring up the markets where you are, and making sure there's enough cash flow left over for yourself. So
something you also mentioned there that's actually really important is being able to do that 75% of after repair value. So let's say we have a $100,000 house. We want to make sure it's $75,000 is basically the max we spend on that, including purchase and reno. Obviously, that's a $100,000 house. It's tough to find those in Canada anymore. However, use that. And
email them to us if you.
Yeah, send them to us. Although I think the big thing also is that the infrastructure that you've been able to build up, and I mean, I've kind of rode on your coattails for the infrastructure, and I know when I'm selling as an agent to other investors of mine, they say, okay, I want to be all my cash out, I want to keep being able to recycle over and over again. And I'm like, great, well, you better be really hands-on and have a huge infrastructure, because if you're going to try and hire somebody and not be on that site for, 3 months while that production's going on, you're going to pay a premium for that. It's going to cost you 10, 15, 20% more on that renovation, which is going to make it so you have to leave cash in the property. I think that's the real big thing, is that we've been able to work together to build out a large infrastructure. I'm going to put this mainly on you at this point in time. That infrastructure now keeps our renovation costs at a point where we can buy, renovate, refinance, and get most, if not all, of our equity back out. And that's one thing that most investors aren't going to be able to jump in and do right away. There's very few that I've seen be able to do that, and usually it takes a few years to get to that point.
I would agree with it. There's a few ways of investing in real estate, and I think it's good in any way. I think the passive approach is probably a little less stressful sometimes. If you have another job and you're able to save up money and just start buying income properties, that's great. I mean, you're going to help wherever you're going, especially if it's a sub-GTA markets. I mean, Toronto already has good appreciation, but when you're as a cash flow investor, those areas aren't going to really cash flow for you. But the reason we're able to do it at scale really is because of the infrastructure. We're more of a management company at times than we are just, passive investors. And again, there's inherently a little more risk when you're doing it that way, but it's also structured like a business. So we have our project managers, we have our engineers, we have our lawyers, we have everything that you need to kind of grow this at scale and be a little more effective in what we're doing. Now, that doesn't mean you can't just buy a home and fix it up and get, the same return or even better return, for instance. Like, if you're a handy person and you're going out there and you're confident you're able to do the work yourself, well, obviously you're going to save on labor. At the amount of sites that we're running at a time, it's not possible for us to get in there and fix up our sites, even if we could do everything. So, there's a risk-reward factor there, and obviously we're super passionate about real estate. All of our businesses are essentially around real estate, so it's a little bit different, but that doesn't mean you have to have that to get started. And obviously, I'd recommend not starting out that way and really just passively investing and learning your way, because there's, all roads lead to Oz, as they say, and there's many ways to success in real estate, and in Canada in particular. I won't get into it too long here, but we have a massive housing crisis. We have extremely low vacancy, and for the foreseeable future, we're going to need to build and help Canada in general just have more units and places where people can live and affordably and continue to grow with that.
But I will say, based on that statement you just said, I mean, the Trudeau government's planning on bringing about 340,000 new immigrants into Canada this year, and we've approved, 160,000 of new houses. So, I mean, typical math, it's pretty simple to calculate on that. We're a little short. And so it's not like we're going to have a bigger supply of housing for the people that we currently have. And we have a shortage as it sits right now. So we actually are going to be going into a bigger shortage, which is only going to drive house prices up even more.
Correct. Yeah. No, there's waiting lists in almost every submarket right now for subsidized housing. Like there's 14,000 people in the Niagara region alone on a waiting list, just looking for single, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom homes, 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom places to live, where the government is subsidizing them, and they literally cannot find a place right now. So it is actually a crisis, but most people aren't aware of it. We're talking about higher rents. We're talking about higher home prices. The government is putting some things in place that are making it a little easier for first-time home buyers. But really, we have a crazy housing crisis that is not really talked about that much unless you're really doing your research in there. If you're under 2% vacancy and we're building at half the rate that we're bringing immigrants in, you're going to have some housing crisis. And this isn't something that just changes overnight. We're not going to have 500,000 units built next month, but we're probably going to have more immigrants coming into the country in the next 5-10 years than we had this year. And that's the same for 5-10 years ago and 5-10 years before that. So we're the most underpopulated, massive country in the entire world, second largest land mass. So don't, judge me on that one. But we do have a very low population for the size that we have, and we do need to grow into that. So I think more people, if they looked into that, would realize the benefits in investing in real estate as well too. So.
One thing that I'll touch on right now is also speaking about the future of real estate, what it looks like. I mean, right now we have a shortage, that crisis is happening. Something that I've thought of over the last little while is I would love to see legal duplexes, legal triplexes, multifamily homes actually be deeded separately. I know this is a big thing in London, England, where let's use a duplex for instance. You have an upstairs, downstairs. It's the same thing as a semi-detached house where you have two houses that are built into one, except now it's an upstairs, downstairs duplex. So why wouldn't we be able to deed those separately? Why wouldn't we say, the upstairs floor is now $300,000 and the downstairs one is $250,000 because it's a basement, it's a little bit less appealing. Yeah. But I think that would be a huge solution for the government to say, hey, well, you know what? Now we can actually make more affordable housing, because now this $500,000 house or $450,000 house is now a $300,000 half a house and $250,000 half a house, which ends up working out to be a win for the investor, a win for the government because there's taxes on both of them, but it's also an opportunity for more people to get into the housing market. That's just a personal view of where I think things should go, and it's a solution that I've seen. Now I haven't obviously worked out the logistics of that, what it would be for the economy overall, although I see it as a win-winner all around. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. I didn't even know that, but I do know, like, my personal opinion is that 2-unit homes are going to be much more popular, especially duplexes, because that's kind of like an entry level for investors where they start. We're still doing that as well too, because we just like that market. But for additional income for anybody, it seems to be the new thing. This is much more common in the States now. It's much more common in Canada. And I think that those are going to be a really solid investment. I had lunch with the mayor in St. Catharines a couple months ago, and he was saying the exact same things. He feels like duplexes and 2 units are going to be, the next generation thing over the next 10 years. Because unfortunately, incomes are just not rising as fast as inflation. And they haven't for about 60 years. So, like, if you're looking at that pendulum, well, what can you do to afford your own home so that you're not, out too much money every single month, and additional income coming out of your basement apartment, makes a big difference. Or like Dylan said, segregating the units. So now you got 2 separate places, so 2 separate deeds on one house. I'm sure that would be good for taxes for the government, and it would allow a lower entry point for people. But regardless, that or not, I think that 2 units are probably, in my opinion, single family homes always, I guess appreciate over time, but I think that that's going to be a sweet spot over the next 10 to 15 years for home ownership, just because it gives you multi-purpose, and they can move out and then rent it out and cover their overhead as well too.
A question I get asked a lot when we're doing duplex conversions or 2-unit conversions is, well, do we want to plan for the future where a single family buyer may come back in and change that back out? And I guess where we're at right now is, why would you do that? In what economic are we looking at that shows that we're going to have an issue where we're going to have too many houses and not enough people? I don't see any future of that in Ontario, Southern Ontario especially, where we'd actually go backwards. So realistically, when you do a duplex conversion, I always say spend a little bit more. When you do that, it's a legal second suite, but spend a little bit more on it and really identify those as 2 totally separate units. Block off that stairwell completely, drywall it up, fire rate it, get rid of the stairwell, whatever you need to do to make sure that you have 2 totally separately contained units, because at the end of the day, you're not going to switch it back. And when you look into a lot of these multifamilies that have been around for 30, 40, 100 years, whatever that may be, you'll never see someone opening the door back up and going back down. And if you do, it's less than 1% of the population. So with that said, what I would say is when you do a duplex conversion or a legal accessory suite basement apartment, make it 2 totally separate units. Kind of go all in, because at the end of the day, you're not going to regret it.
Yeah, and it's also going to be legal as well too. I mean, there's other ways to do it where if you like, they're just an in-law suite. If you're going to have your relatives there, I mean, that's a big thing right now. We have a friend of ours who actually just purchased a property in Burlington. It's really nice, right on the water, and he's got a second suite in the basement for his in-laws, which is incredible. And this is something that even in the let's call them upper middle class or higher priced areas that people are doing because like, why wouldn't you? It makes sense to, and you're providing value to the country as a whole. I know that sounds a little like audacious and out there, but it's the truth. Vacancy, unfortunately, it's not going to come down at this point, and I can't stress that enough. It is going to come down, and I can't stress that enough because we're just not building as fast as we're bringing people in. We have a lot of development to do. I say this a lot, and you hear it, but Canada is the most developed country in the world, and you could do yourself a favor and Canada a favor and help out doing that yourself because it will provide value. Whether it's you can rent it out separately for Airbnbs. You can legally rent it to a full-time tenant, or you can have in-laws there as well too. And that goes for the next person living there because really at the end of the day, you may own your home, but you're not going to be the last person to own your home unless, we won't even get into why that would happen. So that's kind of a big thing. I think you're really providing value doing that. I don't think there's a reason why, you shouldn't unless you just have something against it, and it's going to be a win-win all around. So
why don't we jump into a couple current projects right now? I mean, how many we got on the go right now? 30-ish?
Well, maybe on Dylan's side, probably, I believe 12 sites are running right now. We got a few, we got a bunch in two different cities, essentially. Right now, a couple that we'll touch on in St. Catharines. One of them right here that we're going to show you is a beautiful home that was a single family, and guess what? We are converting it into a 2-unit project. So that one is pretty good. There's no extensions there, but you still did need to go to the city to get phase 1 and phase 2 drawings to ensure that our ancillary suites were legal in the correct size. That's another thing, guys. You really want to do things legally because if the city ever comes in and they do give you a hard time for other tenants being that there's really big fines that you could get if you're not staying compliant. The fire code's always changing.
And safety of that tenant too. I mean, if someone goes and dies in your basement because you did a terrible renovation, you didn't follow the legalities. I mean, first of all, that would weigh on me for the rest of my life. Like I would not be comfortable with that. And additionally, there's going to be bigger than fines. I mean, you could potentially be sued with all kinds of issues. So.
Correct. And that beautiful insurance you've been paying is not going to be able to cover you either because they're going to find an easy loophole, which is you didn't do what you were supposed to do, right? So. Absolutely correct. And so this one right here that we're showing you is, again, a 2-unit. It's a little bit quicker project, but again, when you're dealing with permits, some of your holdups is going to be the cities. A lot of cities in the sub-GTA markets are a little backed up right now, so if they tell you 10 to 15 days, often it could take over a month to get your permits in. But this is a great project, and if you're working with a good engineer and they know what they're doing, this is a relatively simple 2-unit conversion. Now, I don't want to stress that anybody could jump in and just do that off the bat. You need someone with experience to go in there and do it when you're tearing everything out and putting it back together. But again, this is a 2-unit conversion that we're doing right now. And the other one in St. Catharines that I'll show you right here, you can see we just added a second story to this home. And same thing here, this is a single family home, but we decided to build up. Now, this goes through the same requirements. We had to go to the city and shows phase 1, phase 2. There's different requirements that you need to stick by. Again, work with a good engineer. This is enough green space, enough parking, and enough size on the lot to make sure that you can do that. So again, you can see what we kind of have a niche for and a liking for, and that is these nice single family to 2-unit conversions. And yeah, those are a couple we're working on. I'm sure we're gonna thumb through some of the completed sites as well too, which a lot of them were the same. They were 2-unit conversions, existing 2 units that we upgraded and put in proper electrical plumbing so they could be up to code and look like the best units in the city. So that's what we're working on right now.
And you will notice that these properties are in B and C areas. I mean, we're not looking at buying A plus areas. I'm not buying a lakeshore property. We are buying the properties that are in the bottom of the market price point wise. We are reviving them, bringing them back. We're doing some above average renovations on the properties to make sure that they are the nicest units in the neighborhood and in the area. And then we are able to actually cash flow more than you normally would on a 2-unit conversion like that in an A or an A plus area because of the fact that our price is a little bit lower. You don't see the change in rental that much between a BC area versus an A or A plus area. The actual prices of rent are not that much different. However, the actual value of the home on completion can substantially change. 100 grand, 200 grand, something like that. And so it makes a lot more sense to be focused for us on smaller markets. Now that does take more management. There is more involvement because the tenants may need a little bit more, hand holding. Some of them come out without, they're on, the government pays the rent, right? So it's not necessarily someone who's a blue collar worker going to work and coming home every day and being able to pay the full price rent. So want to touch on that?
Yeah, now that said, you do want great tenant selection. Obviously, we do have some people that are subsidized by the government, but we try to find the the best people possible for all of our units. I mean, we have professors in our units. We have a whole range of people. The great thing about submarkets in the GTA that we have now, which is now really showing more love, is they're not. How do I say this nicely? They're not ghettos. You're not collecting your rent with a gun. These are still relatively nice areas, and really they just need a lot of love. Like, you got to understand that Canada's economy runs on real estate, just like any first world nation. We have $7 trillion of wealth in real estate. So if you go to a market like St. Catharines or Windsor, that people are like, oh, that market's been kind of down. Well, yeah, that's great, but really it's the market hasn't gone up, but the cost of build, the cost of materials, the cost of labor, everything else has gone up. So without people coming in and investing in these cities, the economy is always going to be in like a recessionary environment. So you're really going there and helping, you're not taking $1 million home and making it $2 million and more unaffordable. You're taking homes that are way under the cost to build and then bringing up closer to the cost to build, which is really helping the economy as a whole. If you look at any state, city in North America, if they're under the price to build, it's going to be a recessionary type environment in the city. People aren't going to have a lot of money to spend. They're not going to be able to reinvest in the city. The property taxes are going to be low for the city, so the infrastructure is not going to be good. So really, I mean, you're doing a good service into going into these cities and building, but it does require a little more work, of course, because you're going into a city without the kind of same infrastructure and demand always. Now, that leads us back to our vacancy. The catch-22 there is vacancy is so low everywhere that there is still extreme demand. Like in real estate, you're purchasing your own clients. If you're buying a house, you're purchasing your clients. This is a scenario where if you build it, they will come. That's not often the case now in business, but it is in real estate, especially in Canada. We don't have these high vacancies in other areas, and you want to help bring that economy up. So those are the things we deal with in St. Catharines, and kind of touch back on our philosophy as to why we're there as well too. And of course, you're not losing money month over month like you might be on a Toronto condo when leasing that out. And that's very important for trying to build your net worth and sustain you through possible recessions that may come in the future.